In this video, I've got the latest update on a winter storm that means impacts are coming from blizzard conditions to spots of severe weather for parts of the country into the week ahead. I have the latest details on that, plus what else you need to be watching with the weather right here in this video. In the last video, I spent a decent bit of time talking about the setup for this winter storm. In this one, we're just going to go ahead and jump right into the latest overview with the latest blended guidance from the GFS ensembles. And as you can see, we're getting much closer to impacts as by the time we're getting into the overnight hours of tonight on our Monday night, and then into the early to mid part of our Tuesday, March 18th of 2025, we're going to be watching our snowfall showers and some of the more moderate bands of snow that we will be seeing with low pressure as it moves through the west, coming on through places like Nevada, Idaho, southern Montana, all the way back down towards parts of Utah, Colorado, and I don't want to leave you out there in Wyoming as well, as some of the heaviest snow that we see here through parts of the Intermountain West will actually impact parts of central and northern Wyoming by the time we get through our Tuesday afternoon. Eventually, our strong low pressure and associated winds will begin to move on out into parts of the plains and Midwest out of Tuesday night into Wednesday morning, where it continues to look like we'll see some rain and storms, as temperatures could be near 60 to 70 in some parts of Iowa around Wednesday morning. But eventually, we're going to see temperatures crash down to near 30 by the end of the day over a lot of the state, as some of that snow that you see that starts around Nebraska and Kansas is expected to pivot over into those zones. And right in this zone right here, where you're seeing some of these deep blue colors on screen, that is where this blended guidance is indicating that this new winter storm that I've been overviewing is likely going to have that highest confidence to produce not only that possibility for heavy snow, but possibly some blizzard conditions, exiting northern Kansas, going through Lincoln and Omaha in Nebraska, Council Bluffs up to Sioux City in Iowa, and then as you get especially into the southeastern suburbs of Minneapolis, Minnesota, Eau Claire, Wisconsin, all the way up to Marquette, Michigan. Very moderate to heavy snow expected in this particular band around late Tuesday night through Wednesday, as this low pressure is going to begin to continue to kick on up. The latest information that I'm getting from the Storm Prediction Center, as well as just these models in general, is also indicating the fact that this boundary that stretches back down along the low pressure and to its south is going to have an associated cold front, and that will likely lead to at least some shower and thunderstorm development from Michigan, Indiana, Ohio, and all the way back down towards the mid-south into our Wednesday afternoon and evening. That could mean we get some brief severe storms along this boundary, and I'll talk a little bit more on that here in just a minute. Either way, it looks like we'll continue to see rainfall moving closer to the Appalachians, while areas that started with rain back into the Midwest in places like Chicago, Fort Wayne, Indiana, Indianapolis, even Detroit, Michigan, will possibly wake up to some brief snow showers or flurries that could continue through some parts of the day Thursday. By the end of Thursday, more low pressure getting closer to the east coast could mean we get some rain or some heavier thunderstorms, and that trend continues to look like it's going to be most likely with the best chance for a stronger storm or two to be here near the mid-Atlantic shores from places like Pennsylvania and New Jersey, all the way back down there towards the Outer Banks and places like Cape Hatteras, North Carolina. There will be the possibility of some lingering snow or a brief transition to even more moderate snow somewhere into the New England states right before the very end of this event into our Friday. Before I talk in a little bit more detail about the severe weather as well as snowfall total aspects of this system, I want to use the blended guidance on screen to talk about some of the wind gusts that will surround this storm as it crosses all the way from the west to the eastern parts of the country as we go through the next several days. Let's start with what's going to happen around and ahead of this storm as we go into our Tuesday, March 18th of 2025, where gusty winds in the plains and in some parts of the southwest and Four Corners regions of the U.S. where we won't be seeing precipitation could not only lead to, of course, some damage as a result of the high winds, but also that potential for some very elevated fire conditions. Wildfires could be a big concern, and of course, you do not want to be doing any sort of burning when these winds are blowing on through. That will include some of these highest gusts that will likely center themselves coming out of parts of Colorado and New Mexico, and moving out into western Kansas, western Oklahoma, and west Texas, where 50-plus mile-per-hour wind gusts look pretty likely as we go through the end of the day Tuesday. What about the trends as we go into our Wednesday? It looks like we are going to be continuing to see blizzard conditions exiting parts of Kansas, moving on up into Nebraska, Iowa, and eventually parts of Minnesota, Wisconsin, maybe even trying to make a run for the upper peninsula of Michigan, as a lot of this zone is shaded in the green and orange colors for at least 30 to 40 mile per hour wind gusts, in some cases getting closer to 50 mile per hour wind gusts. That could include, especially around that Nebraska and Iowa border, for some of those heaviest winds that will blow snow around and create near impossible travel conditions and whiteout concerns through the day Wednesday. We'll also see some strong south to north winds out ahead of the low pressure where it will still be warm through the day Wednesday. That will include up and down the Mississippi River Valley all the way on up towards places like the Great Lakes region. We'll continue to see some gusty winds blowing around any of that snowfall that goes into the Great Lakes and wrapping around into the Ohio Valley through the day Thursday as cooler air moves in. It will also just be a generally breezy day over the eastern third of the country. It will continue to be breezy at some times through the night Thursday night and into Friday as we start to see low pressure getting closer to the northeast coast of the U.S., but most of our wind into our Friday is going to be very closely centered right around that New York, Vermont, New Hampshire, southern New England vicinity, with most of the rest of the East Coast beginning to see the winds die down, and especially the Ohio Valley starting to see winds die down out of Thursday and into that Friday time frame. With the wind impacts in mind, let's talk about one of the things the wind could blow around. That's going to be your snowfall totals, and let's look at the 24-hour increments of that snowfall with the latest guidance here with your European ensembles and what they're projecting. You can see, first of all, through the increment from around our early Tuesday morning through our early Wednesday, March 19th of 2025, we're going to be watching most of our snow moving through parts of the Mountain West, where some of the higher elevations of especially Utah, Colorado, through parts of Wyoming, southern Montana, and into western South Dakota could pick up upwards of 3 to 6 inches, closer to 6 to 12 in those highest peaks. Eventually, then we'll see our stripe of snow developing out of parts of the plains Wednesday and then into Wednesday night as you come out of there and into the upper Midwest, with the best chance for at least a few inches of snow out of the far northern parts of Kansas, through the southeastern half of Nebraska, through a lot of northern and northwestern Iowa, far southeastern Minnesota, through parts of Wisconsin, and up into the upper peninsula of Michigan. Some spots, especially along this current forecasted heaviest stripe. While this could shift, this is generally that zone that's having the best chance right now of picking up upwards of 4 to 6 inches on the high end, some spots closer to 6 to 10. That's certainly going to be a trend we have to watch, as the more snow you see with blizzard conditions, the more dangerous travel will be, and for longer in these particular zones. Out of Wednesday night into Thursday, we'll get a little bit of light snow in some parts of the Midwest, Ohio Valley, and Great Lakes. Pretty negligible in terms of overall accumulation there. And the same will likely be said about most of the snow we get into the far interior Northeast and maybe closer to the coast, unless something changes with that aspect of the storm into our Friday. Now that I've broken down the winter weather aspect of the storm in more detail, I do need to talk about the rain and severe weather aspect in more detail. And the good news for severe weather is my custom graphic for this winter storm still does not have any yellow, orange, or red shaded areas highlighted. And what that means is that I don't have high confidence in any of the zones that are expected to see rain out of this system to have any sort of scattered or widespread severe weather threat. That being said, we could see some isolated severe weather anywhere from the Mississippi Valley Wednesday, getting closer to the Mid-Atlantic and Southeast by the time we go towards Thursday and Thursday night. So that's going to be something we want to track in more detail, and I actually do have one ONW severe scale graphic, and as of now that is for our Wednesday and Wednesday night time frame. Alright, here it is as I have painted, again, for Wednesday, March 19th, as well as our Wednesday night, the possibility for isolated severe storms with a level 1 to level 2 of 7 on my scale, from parts of Iowa, Minnesota, and Wisconsin all the way back down to Mississippi and Alabama. We'll have the potential possibly for all severe weather hazards, as we actually will have a pretty complex setup with some decent wind fields in the atmosphere for this system. The thing is, we had a system just a few days before this, and that is going to lead to moisture having a very hard time getting far north to support a more widespread severe weather threat. With that being said, that leaves me only one last thing to talk about, and that is going to be the wild temperature swing that occurs from Tuesday to Wednesday to Thursday to Friday of this week, as some zones will warm up as we go through the next 24 to 48 hours, then cool down more, and then warm back up around and behind this system. Let's start with the head of the system into our Tuesday, March 18th of 2025, where all the way from Texas up to Nebraska, from Louisiana all the way up to the Midwest, Ohio Valley, from Florida up into the Mid-Atlantic, we're going to be watching a ridge or a big push northward in the jet stream, allowing for temperatures to get through the 60s and 70s in a lot of the orange shaded zones, even some parts of the plains, including Kansas, where it will snow just a day later. We will be getting through the 80s, while the Mountain West is in the 30s. A crazy contrast there, and you can see that contrast pushing east along that front into our Wednesday. A lot of those highs in parts of Nebraska, Kansas, up into Iowa that are in the 30s and 40s, those will be during the early part of the day. The same will go with 60s that you see there in parts of Missouri, Iowa, and Illinois. Temperatures will only crash down as precipitation continues to quickly cool you off as the day goes on, and that will lead to that eventual transition to a lot of the heavier snow. We'll still have 70s up and down the East Coast Wednesday, even in some cases into our Thursday, but look at that little pocket of cool down that we will see from the Midwest down into the Ohio Valley. It's going to be a chilly one with winds wrapping back around the system Thursday. Temperatures only into the 40s as we get into our Thursday afternoon, even down as far to the south as around the northern part of Tennessee and Kentucky. And then, by the time we go out of Thursday to Friday, we start to rebound just like that, with more 60s filling the picture for a lot of the zones that were just in the 40s and 30s. Snow will be melting already into parts of the central and north central plains. This is what spring does, everybody, with weird systems like this one. That's all I have for today, though. Make sure you're hitting that subscribe button down below, as the next update on this system will likely be late on our Tuesday, March 18th, in a live stream format where I'll also be able to answer your questions. Make sure you're hitting the subscribe button, turning on those notifications if you want more no-hype forecasts. I'll see you right here next time.